talking about practice, right? So a good amount of people message me, or just, in general, are always curious or maybe a little bit anxious about how much practice they should put in for this kind of stuff, for their art. Let's say, you want to start working and make money as soon as possible. How much study should you be doing? Should you kill yourself doing this? 18 hours a day, or should you take it a little bit easier? The one thing that I want to address here is that everybody's tolerance for continued mental work is different. Mine is very low. So it's actually interesting because it's in part why I transitioned to 3D for most of my career. So I started doing a lot of 2D, but it just became to a point where when you're constantly being challenged, especially in my case, some other people on my team have no issues with that whatsoever. So they're able to continuously crank out new designs and just constant brain work from 8 in the morning to 6 at night. I can't do that. So for me, it was really challenging, and so I had to slowly transition to 3D because that felt more relaxing to me. So there's a lot of stuff in 3D where some parts of 3D are very creative, obviously, but there's other parts that's very technical. So you're almost in like idle mode where you're just kind of relaxing doing your UVs. You have to think, of course, but it's definitely not as demanding creatively wise as constant designs or as constant study for this kind of stuff. So again, back to kind of your own personal tolerance, you have to respect it. If you're doing more work than you're comfortable doing naturally, it's okay to push yourself a little bit, right? For maybe a week or two, and then go back to something that's a little bit more normal for you. But it's really important to find that sweet spot where you're not overworking yourself to the point where things become more like a chore, because then it's downhill from there, right? So the second that you feel that working on your art, it feels like a chore, it's bad news. So never try to avoid this point at all costs. And usually that happens because people overwork themselves. So you're going to do too much study maybe, or too much of the same thing, or maybe it's going to be just too many hours, and just spending too many hours working on this stuff. So one way to balance it out that works for me, again, might not work for you, but one thing that I always recommend is that, kind of sprinkled through your studies, work on stuff that you really like. It can be completely unrelated to everything else, or it can be kind of related, but try to sprinkle things in that make you feel good, right? So that make you feel happy. So a completely random example, but let's say you're working on all these assignments here and you're spending a lot of hours on there, and you're starting to be a little bit beat up, a little bit burned out. Make it a habit to take a break once in a while, and not necessarily take a break from art, although if that's what you need, just go ahead and take that break if it's what you need to recharge your battery. But what I've found to recharge my battery that keeps me working on art is really to do something different that I really like. And so, like, the example I was going to mention was, let's say I'm doing a lot of studies and I really, 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 really enjoy drawing flowers, or painting something, or doing something like clay sculpting or something like that. Or maybe I really, really like to draw cute animals, or I really, really like to draw anime style, or whatever it is that you really enjoy in art. Take breaks to do that. Do you work on stuff that you enjoy without the constraints of without any constraints, really, without having to think about all this stuff that you're studying. Although it's always good, if you can keep it in the back of your mind while you're working on these other things that you really enjoy. So the best case scenario is when you can mix those two together. So you work on a little bit of studies and then you work on your personal projects, but in your personal project you're still using a lot of the notion from the different classes, and always thinking about the stuff that you're learning at the same time while working on personal things, right? So things that are different from the assignments, things that you really, really like. So Very important. Don't. It's more like, regardless of what your life situation is, regardless of if you need to find a job for that, if you need to start making money, if you need to prove to your parents that you're progressing, regardless of all of that, and it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around that, but regardless of all of that, you should always make sure that first you keep that drive, you keep that creativity going, that you never burn yourself out. Because if you do, then it's game over. It's like if I always bring this back, but when you're working out, if you're a pro athlete, it's the equivalent of hurting yourself, of injuring yourself, and then you're screwed for a much longer period of time, rather than if you just took a little bit of a break, or that if you just slow down a little bit to not push yourself too much to the point where you break, because once you break, you're screwed. So always make sure to follow kind of your inner pace, be aware of, or try to be more and more aware of this kind of stuff, because it's one of the biggest thing in art. If you lose that fire, if you enjoy yourself art-wise, it's bad news. So it's hard, because sometimes you have that pressure, that outside pressure to hurry up, to get better faster, but that's never going to happen if you enjoy yourself. It's never going to happen if you lose that creativity. So make sure that you keep that first, and everything else should work out as long as this is intact. So that's just my 2 cents on that.